I asked you a question. Don't lie to me. Look at me when I'm talking to you.
Get out of my workshop now. The words should have been a scream, raw and furious, ripping through the phone line the moment I saw the security alert. But they came out cold instead, barely above a whisper, because rage has a way of freezing in your throat when you realize someone has just violated the one place on earth that still feels sacred. Tuesday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. I was sitting in the back corner of Grindstone Coffee in Portland, Oregon, laptop open, headphones on, halfway through editing the final chapter of my photography book when my phone lit up with a notification I never expected to see. Motion detected, studio level 3, unauthorized access. My hands went numb. I tapped the alert and watched the live feed load grainy at first, then sharp and undeniable. There she was. Patricia Drummond, HOA Compliance Director of Creekside Hills, standing inside my private studio with her phone raised, photographing everything like she'd just discovered evidence of a crime instead of trespassing in the middle of one. She moved between the gallery walls where every photograph told a story. My late husband Daniel's work, his legacy, the images he'd captured before pancreatic cancer took him 18 months ago, leaving me with nothing but memory and film. And Patricia Drummond was in there documenting it all like it was hers to inspect. I didn't call her. I called someone else. Someone who could handle this the right way, with badges and authority and consequences that would stick. Because I'm not just a photographer who runs a small gallery out of my converted warehouse. I'm also someone who spent 12 years as a photojournalist covering civil rights cases, property disputes, and people who thought power meant they could do whatever they wanted. I know how the system works. I know that emotion gets dismissed, but evidence creates repercussions that last. So I made one phone call, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. Because Patricia Drummond had just made the worst mistake of her life, and she didn't even know it yet. The message had come through from my neighbor, Felix Ramirez, a software engineer who lived 2 units down in our warehouse conversion complex. Felix and I had bonded over coffee and cameras. He was a hobbyist photographer who'd helped me install my security system 6 months ago when the HOA started getting aggressive about inspection rights. His text, Sienna, Patricia just broke into your place. Not exaggerating. She used some kind of master key on your side entrance. I'm recording from my window. You need to see this. The video file came through seconds later. Shaky footage shot from Felix's loft window showed Patricia approaching my side door, the one marked private, no entry, with a key ring in one hand and her phone in the other. She tried several keys before one finally worked. The lock clicked. The door opened. And she walked inside like she owned the place. My studio wasn't just a studio. It was 3 levels of converted industrial space. I'd spent 5 years transforming into something Daniel and I had dreamed about together. A working gallery, a teaching space, and a memorial to everything we'd built. Ground level, 6. Rotating exhibition walls displaying work from local photographers I mentored. Not a commercial gallery, I didn't sell prints or run a business. Just a community space where artists could show work and learn from each other. Second level, my workspace. Darkroom equipment, digital editing stations, archives of Daniel's unpublished work, research files for my book about Pacific Northwest landscape photography. Third level, Daniel's memorial room, the space I'd built after he died. Every wall covered with his photographs, mountains, coastlines, forests he'd loved. A small table held our wedding photo, a candle I lit every Sunday, and a locked safe containing his ashes and the last roll of film he'd ever shot. Undeveloped. Waiting for the day I was brave enough to process it, and Patricia Drummond had just walked uninvited into all of it. I was already moving, laptop shoved into my bag, chair scraping against the concrete floor loud enough that other customers looked up. I didn't care. I left a 20 on the table and pushed through the door into October rain. My phone was already at my ear, connecting to the one person who could handle this correctly. Sheriff Clayton, this is Sienna Morales at Unit 47, Creekside Industrial. I need to report a breaking and entering in progress. Sheriff Mary Clayton had been with Multnomah County for 23 years. I'd interviewed her once for a piece about property rights enforcement. She knew me. More importantly, she knew I wasn't the type to exaggerate. "Who's the intruder?" Her voice shifted from routine to alert. "Patricia Drummond, HOA Compliance Director. She just used an unauthorized key to enter my property after I explicitly denied her access in writing this morning. I have video evidence from my neighbor plus 8 security cameras recording everything inside right now." Silence on the line. Then, "I'm 12 minutes out. Do not engage. Stay away from the property until I arrive. Can you access your security footage remotely?" Already pulling it up. I was in my Subaru now, phone propped on the dashboard, fingers swiping through my security app. 8 camera feeds loaded different angles of my 3-level space. Ground floor cameras showed Patricia moving between exhibition walls, photographing every piece of work like she was conducting an investigation. Second floor cameras caught her going through my desk drawers labeled Private Research, flipping through notebooks that contained interviews, drafts, personal correspondence with Daniel during his treatment. But it was cameras 7 and 8 that made my vision tunnel. Third floor, Daniel's memorial room. She was climbing the stairs to the door marked Private, Daniel's memorial space. For one heartbeat, I thought she might respect that boundary. That maybe seeing those words would make her realize she'd already gone too far, but she pushed the door open and walked inside. The memorial room was small, maybe 250 square feet, with soft LED lighting that made Daniel's landscape photographs glow like windows into another world. Mountains at dawn, coastlines at dusk, forests wrapped in fog. Every image a place we'd visited together, a moment he'd captured and printed himself. The table in the corner held our wedding photo, the candle from last Sunday still sitting there, and the fireproof safe containing his ashes and that final undeveloped roll of film. Patricia photographed it all, the walls, the table, the safe itself. Then she tried the handle. When it didn't open, she actually looked around the room like she might find a combination written on a sticky note somewhere. The violation of it, the absolute desecration, made something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't just trespassing. This was someone walking through grief like it was a code violation they had the right to inspect. I pulled onto my street and saw Patricia's white Audi Q5 parked halfway onto the sidewalk outside my building. Driver's door still open, like she'd been in such a hurry she couldn't be bothered to park correctly. Sheriff Clayton's patrol car rolled up 30 seconds behind me. No lights, no siren. Just steady, professional law enforcement arriving to handle a crime in progress. She stepped out mid-40s, athletic build, gray-streaked brown hair pulled back, the kind of presence that communicated competence without needing to announce it. We met at the entrance to my building. She's still inside? Sheriff Clayton's eyes tracked to my side door, which hung slightly ajar where Patricia had forced entry. Yes. She's been in there 26 minutes. I held up my phone, showing the live feed. We watched Patricia descend from the 3rd floor, back to the 2nd, still photographing, still documenting her imaginary violations. Sheriff Clayton pulled out her notebook. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to unlock your main entrance. When she sees us standing there, I handle everything. You stay calm. Don't engage physically. Don't threaten. Understood? Completely." My voice was steady now. That cold certainty spreading outward, sharpening my focus. This was it. This was the moment Patricia Drummond would learn that authority has limits, and she'd just obliterated every single one. I pulled out my keys and unlocked the main entrance. The heavy steel door swung open with a low groan, daylight spilling into the gallery space, and there, standing between 2 exhibition walls with her phone still raised, was Patricia Drummond. The light hit her face, and I watched her expression transform from confident authority to pure shock because she hadn't expected this. She'd thought she'd have time to snoop, to find her evidence, to leave before I even knew she'd been there. Instead, she was looking at me and Sheriff Clayton standing side by side in the October rain. And she knew, in that crystalline instant, that everything had just gone catastrophically wrong. Let me take you back 8 hours, because understanding what happened requires understanding how deliberately Patricia Drummond planned this violation. That morning, at 7:43 a.m., while I was brewing coffee and reviewing my book manuscript notes, my email pinged. Subject: Mandatory Inspection Notice, Unit 47, Creekside Industrial. From Patricia Drummond, HOA Compliance Director. I opened it standing at my kitchen counter, coffee mug halfway to my lips. Miss Morales. This email serves as notice that Creekside Hills HOA will conduct a mandatory compliance inspection of Unit 47 today, October 17th, between 1 to 5 p.m. Multiple complaints have been filed regarding suspected commercial activity, unauthorized structural modifications, and potential zoning violations. Per HOA bylaws, Section 4.7, compliance officers have authority to inspect any unit suspected of violations. Your cooperation is expected. Failure to provide access will result in daily fines of $250 until compliance is achieved. Access will be gained via Master HOA key if you are not present. Patricia Drummond, HOA Compliance Director. I read it 3 times, each pass making my jaw clench tighter. Everything about it was wrong. I walked upstairs to my workspace and pulled up the Creekside Hills HOA bylaws, the complete document every homeowner received at purchase. I'd read it cover to cover twice because that's what photojournalists do. We read the fine print. Section 4.7 was right there on page 19. The section clearly required 72 hours written notice, homeowner written consent, and inspection by licensed third-party contractors, not AOA officers. It also specified that commercial activity complaints must include documented evidence and signed statements from complainants. Patricia's email violated every single requirement. I spent 40 minutes drafting my response, choosing every word with journalistic precision. Patricia, your inspection notice violates HOA bylaw section 4.7 inches multiple ways. 1. Required 72-hour advance notice not provided. 2. Homeowner consent not requested or obtained. 3. No documented complaints or complainant signatures provided. 4. HOA officers lack authority to conduct inspections, must use licensed contractors. Additionally, I operate no commercial business. My studio is a private space for personal photography, work, and community education. Non-profit. I mentor local photographers at no charge. No sales, no business license, no commercial activity. I am denying access as is my legal right. If you wish to pursue inspection, please follow proper procedures, including third-party licensed inspectors and documented evidence of specific violations. Sienna Morales. I hit send at 8:47 a.m. The response I expected was either acknowledgement or argument about bylaw interpretation. What I got was silence. No reply at 9. No reply at 10:30. No reply at noon. By 1 p.m., I'd moved on with my day, assuming Patricia had realized she'd overstepped and was regrouping. I had my publisher meeting at 2, so I drove to Grindstone Coffee, where the Wi-Fi was reliable and the espresso was excellent. I was deep into discussing my final chapter when Felix's message arrived. But before that message, before the video, before I watched Patricia break into my studio, there was something else happening that I didn't yet understand. Patricia wasn't backing down. She was escalating, because she'd decided that authority meant she could do whatever she wanted, and I was about to teach her exactly how wrong she was. The gallery door stood open now, rain-damp air mixing with the familiar scent of photographic chemicals and old wood. Patricia stood frozen between 2 exhibition walls, phone lowered but still clutched in her hand, face cycling through emotions too fast to name. Sheriff Clayton stepped forward, her boots loud on the concrete floor. "Miss Drummond, you need to exit this property immediately." Her voice carried that particular law enforcement tone, not shouting, but commanding absolute authority. The voice that says, "This is not negotiable, this is what happens next, and you will comply." Patricia's eyes darted between Sheriff Clayton and me. I could see her mind working, trying to find an angle, trying to construct a version of reality where she wasn't completely in the wrong. Sheriff Clayton, I'm conducting an official HOA inspection. Her voice had that blend of condescension and certainty I'd heard at countless HOA meetings. I have authority under our community bylaws to investigate suspected violations. Miss Morales has been... Stop. Sheriff Clayton held up one hand. You broke into private property after being explicitly denied access in writing. That's criminal trespass and breaking and entering. HOA bylaws don't override criminal law. Step outside now. I used an HOA master key. That's not breaking and entering. We have keys to all units for emergency access. This isn't an emergency, I said, my voice level and cold, and you were explicitly denied entry. I sent you an email at 8:47 this morning citing the exact bylaw you're violating. I pulled out my phone and showed them both the screen, email, thread open, timestamp, clear, 8:47 a.m. Patricia's face flushed red. That email was you refusing to cooperate with legitimate HOA authority. Section 4.7 clearly states, Section 4.7 requires 72-hour notice and homeowner consent, I interrupted. It also requires licensed inspectors, not HOA officers. How many HOA meetings do you attend per month? I cut her off. Should I break into your house to count them? Should I photograph your desk to make sure you're not abusing your authority? Sheriff Clayton made that sound again, definitely a suppressed laugh this time. All right, that's enough. Miss Drummond, stand by my vehicle while I document the scene. Patricia walked toward the patrol car like she was moving through deep water. She had to pass her Audi with its door still hanging open, rain pooling on the leather seat. Sheriff Clayton turned to me. Show me the damage and the footage. We walked to the side door where Patricia had forced entry. The frame wasn't splintered, the key had worked, but the lock mechanism was damaged where she'd forced it past my additional deadbolt security. She used an unauthorized copy of an HOA master key. I explained. The building management deactivated those keys 2 years ago after a series of break-ins. Anyone still using one is trespassing. Sheriff Clayton photographed the door, the lock, the damage. Then I pulled up my security footage, starting from when Patricia arrived at 2:47 p.m. We watched her try the main entrance first, locked, as always. Then circle around to the side door. Try several keys from a ring. Finally, find one that worked. Force it past the deadbolt. Enter my property. That shows intent, Sheriff Clayton said. She came prepared with multiple keys, knowing she'd been denied access. I nodded and let the footage continue. Ground floor. Patricia. Photographing exhibition walls. Work by other photographers. Community art that had nothing to do with me personally. Second floor. Patricia going through my desk drawers, opening filing cabinets labeled private, flipping through notebooks containing my manuscript drafts and personal correspondence. Then the third floor. I slowed the video to normal speed here. Sheriff Clayton needed to see this part clearly. Patricia approached the door marked Privet, Daniel's memorial space. She paused. Read the sign. Then opened the door and walked inside. The memorial room footage showed everything in stark clarity. Patricia walked the perimeter, looking at Daniel's landscape photographs. Mountains he'd hiked to capture at dawn, coastlines we'd driven hours to reach, forests he'd loved. She photographed the memorial table, our wedding photo, the candle, the safe. Then she tried to open the safe. When it didn't budge, she looked around the room searching for a combination or key. Sheriff Clayton's jaw tightened. She tried to open your safe? Yes. That's attempted burglary on top of everything else. Sheriff Clayton closed her notebook and looked at me directly. Miss Morales, are you pressing charges? Because based on this evidence, Miss Drummond has committed multiple crimes. This isn't a civil HOA dispute. This is criminal trespass, breaking and entering, attempted burglary, and violation of privacy laws. I didn't hesitate. I'm pressing every charge available. What she did wasn't just illegal, it was desecration. That memorial room is sacred to me. My husband died 18 months ago, and that's where I keep his memory alive. She walked in there, photographed everything, and tried to break into a safe containing his ashes. Sheriff Clayton nodded slowly. Understood. I'll need copies of all footage and a written statement. Can you have that by tomorrow morning? Yes. Everything documented and delivered to your office first thing. She walked back toward her patrol car where Patricia stood, looking shell-shocked and diminished. I heard Sheriff Clayton say, "Miss Drummond, you're being detained for questioning. You have the right to remain silent." Patricia's voice cracked. "I was just doing my job. You committed multiple felonies. That's not a job. That's a crime." I stayed where I was, standing in the doorway of my studio with rain falling behind me and Daniel's photographs glowing softly inside. Felix appeared from his unit, walking over with his phone in hand. I got everything on video, the whole approach, the keyring, all of it. Already sent it to you, but I can send it to Sheriff Clayton too. "Please do," I said. "Every piece of evidence matters." He looked past me into the gallery. She had no right. Everyone in this complex knows you're just working on your book, that the studio is personal. Patricia's been on a power trip for years, but this is next level. I nodded, but didn't say much else. The evidence spoke for itself. The law was clear, and Patricia Drummond was about to learn exactly what happens when you confuse authority with immunity. 30 minutes after Sheriff Clayton drove away with Patricia in the back seat, I was still standing in my gallery trying to process what had just happened. The sheriff had asked me to walk her through the entire space one more time before leaving. She wanted to see everything Patricia had seen, understand what she'd been looking for, document the full scope of the violation. So we went through all 3 levels, and I showed her my world. The ground floor was exactly what it looked like. 6 rotating exhibition walls displaying work from local photographers I mentored through a program I'd started 2 years ago after Daniel died. Teaching had become my way of staying connected to photography when my own work felt impossible. The walls currently held images from 3 photographers, landscape work from a college student, street photography from a retired journalist, nature macro shots from a biologist who just picked up a camera. None of it was for sale. No prices, no purchase inquiries, just art on display because these people deserve to see their work properly presented. Sheriff Clayton walked the perimeter, taking notes. "This is clearly non-commercial. Completely. I don't charge for mentorship or wall space. I don't sell prints. I fund this out of my book advances and Daniel's life insurance settlement. It's therapy, not business." We climbed to the second floor of my workspace, and Sheriff Clayton's expression shifted to understanding. This wasn't just an office. It was clearly a place where someone spent significant time. My desk faced the large industrial windows overlooking the street, 2 monitors, camera equipment arranged on shelves. Behind me, floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with photography theory, Pacific Northwest natural history, technical manuals for darkroom chemistry, books about landscape composition and light. Filing cabinets along one wall held interview transcripts from photographers I'd profiled for my book, historical research about Oregon's photographic history, correspondence with gallery curators and publishers. Sheriff Clayton picked up one of my notebooks, a leather-bound journal where I kept research notes. She flipped through pages covered in my handwriting, observations about light quality at different elevations, sketches of camera angles, quotes from interviews with wilderness photographers, planning notes for my book's final chapter. She set it down carefully. "This is legitimate research. Anyone can see that." Yes. But Patricia went through those same drawers, opened those same notebooks, photographed my computer screens, and personal notes like she was gathering evidence of criminality. The violation isn't just trespassing. It's the assumption that my intellectual work, my creative process, my private correspondence was somehow subject to her inspection. Then we climbed to the 3rd floor. Sheriff Clayton stopped at the door, reading the sign. "Private, Daniel's memorial space." I told her she could enter, that I wanted her to see what Patricia had violated. The memorial room was small and quiet, lit by soft LEDs that made Daniel's photographs look like they were glowing from within. Every image was one he'd taken during our 15 years together. The collection represented every significant moment of our relationship captured through landscape photography. Mount Hood at sunrise from our first camping trip when we were dating, Cannon Beach at low tide from our honeymoon, Columbia River Gorge in autumn from the year we bought this building, Silver Falls State Park in winter from 3 months before his diagnosis, Cape Perpetua at sunset from our last road trip together, 6 weeks before he died. In the center of the back wall was a large print of Daniel himself, standing on a cliff top with his camera, silhouetted against an Oregon sunset. I'd taken that photograph. The only image of his in the room that I'd captured instead of him. Sheriff Clayton stood quietly, taking it all in, understanding without me having to explain what this space meant. The small table in the corner held our wedding photo, Daniel in his navy suit, me in my ivory dress, both of us younger and full of plans we'd never complete. Next to it sat the candle I lit every Sunday. And, beside that, the safe. A small fireproof box, about the size of a large book, with an electronic keypad. She tried to open this? Sheriff Clayton's voice was quiet, respectful. Yes. The footage shows her trying the handle, then looking around for a combination. What's inside? Daniel's ashes, and the last roll of film he ever shot. Undeveloped. He was too sick to process it before he died. I haven't been able to bring myself to develop it yet. When I do, it'll be the last new images I ever see from him. So it's been sitting in that safe for 18 months, waiting for the day I'm brave enough. Sheriff Clayton was quiet for a long moment. I'm very sorry for your loss, Miss Morales. And I'm sorry anyone violated this space. This adds significant weight to the emotional distress claim. What Miss Drummond did here goes beyond criminal trespass. This is a profound violation of your grief. I thanked her and explained more about Daniel, how we'd met at a photography workshop 15 years ago, how we'd built this business together before he got sick, how the memorial room had become my way of processing loss. The film in the safe was from his last trip to the coast 3 weeks before he died. He'd insisted on going even though he was weak and in pain. He'd said he needed to capture one more sunset, one more stretch of shoreline. He'd shot that entire roll and come home exhausted but peaceful. I'll develop it when I finish my book. I told Sheriff Clayton, when I complete the project we'd been working on together, it feels right to wait until then. Like it's the final chapter we'll write together, even though he's gone. Sheriff Clayton nodded like she understood. Miss Drummond is going to face serious consequences for this. Not just legal ones, the kind that follow you. Make sure you document everything, the emotional impact, any therapy sessions, how this has affected your work and your healing process. After she left, I stood alone in my gallery for a long time. The rain had stopped. Gray afternoon light filtered through the industrial windows. Everything was quiet except for the hum of my refrigeration unit where I stored film. Patricia's violation had turned my sanctuary into a crime scene. The space that had felt safe, the one place where Daniel still felt present, now carried the stain of intrusion. But I also felt something else, a cold determination that this violation would not go unanswered. That Patricia Drummond would face every consequence the law allowed. And that when this was over, the system would have sent a clear message about boundaries and authority and the difference between the two. I walked up to the memorial room one more time, looked at Daniel's photographs glowing on the walls, sat down in front of our wedding photo. She tried to violate this? I said aloud, but she failed. This space is still ours, still sacred, and I'm going to make sure she understands that. The candle flickered in a draft from somewhere. I chose to believe it was Daniel saying he agreed. 2 hours after Sheriff Clayton took Patricia to the station, I got a call asking me to come provide additional evidence for the formal charging process. The district attorney wanted to review everything in person, wanted to see the documentation that would turn this from simple trespass into something much more serious. I gathered my laptop, the security footage files, the email exchanges, and a folder I'd been building without really knowing why. a collection of other incidents where Patricia had overstepped her authority as HOA compliance director. I drove to the county station with that cold certainty still settled in my chest. What was about to happen would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone in Creekside Hills who'd ever felt powerless against Patricia's authority. The interrogation room was exactly what you'd expect from television. Small table, 4 chairs, fluorescent lights, washing all the color out of everything. Patricia sat on one side with a lawyer. She'd apparently summoned a man in his 50s wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly mortgage, looking like someone used to making problems disappear. Sheriff Clayton sat across from them. The district attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s named Rachel Vance, stood by the wall reviewing documents. When I walked in, Patricia looked up and our eyes met for the first time since the gallery door had opened hours ago. She looked smaller, diminished, like the removal of her authority had physically shrunk her. Her lawyer immediately spoke. My client has been fully cooperative and is prepared to explain the misunderstanding about this isn't a misunderstanding. DA Vance cut him off. Your client broke into private property after being explicitly denied access in writing. We have video evidence from multiple angles, email documentation proving she knew about the denial, and witness testimony. This is clear-cut criminal trespass and breaking and entering. Patricia's lawyer tried again. My client believed she was acting within her HOA authority. There had been complaints about commercial activity, safety concerns. HOA authority doesn't include breaking and entering, DA Vance said flatly. It doesn't matter what she believed. What matters is what she did. And what she did was commit multiple felonies. I set my laptop on the table and opened the video files. I have 8 camera angles covering 26 minutes of footage. I'd like to show you exactly what Miss Drummond did while trespassing in my property. DA Vance nodded. I started with camera 1, ground floor, showing Patricia entering through the side door at 2:47 p.m. We watched her move between exhibition walls, photographing community art that had nothing to do with commercial activity. Camera 4, second floor, showed her rifling through my desk drawers, opening filing cabinets, picking up notebooks filled with my manuscript drafts and personal research. Patricia's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. She was looking for evidence of code violations. That's within her purview as compliance director. I said nothing, just pulled up camera 7. The memorial room. We all watched Patricia climb the stairs, pause at the door clearly marked private, Daniel's memorial space, then open it and walk inside. The footage showed her walking the perimeter. Looking at Daniel's photographs, approaching the memorial table, photographing our wedding picture, photographing the candle, photographing the safe, then trying to open it, looking around for a combination. The room went completely silent. DA Vance spoke first. "What's in that safe, Miss Morales?" I kept my voice level. "My husband's ashes, and the last roll of film he shot before he died 18 months ago. Undeveloped. I'm waiting to process it until I finish the book we were working on together." Patricia made a small sound, almost a gasp. Her face went chalk white. Her lawyer looked at her, then at the screen, then back at her. I could see him realizing this case had just become much worse than he'd thought. DA Vance turned to Patricia. "Your client attempted to open a container holding cremated remains. That elevates this from trespass to something much more serious. Attempted desecration, emotional distress. This is bad." She looked at Patricia directly. "Did you know what was in that safe when you tried to open it?" Patricia shook her head quickly. "No. I had no idea. I thought maybe she was hiding business documents or something illegal. I didn't know about her husband. I didn't know you didn't know because you didn't ask." I interrupted. "You just assumed you had the right to violate every boundary I'd set." I opened another folder on my laptop, the one I'd been compiling for months. Miss Drummond has a pattern of overstepping her authority. I slid printed documents across the table. 4 separate incidents. March 2024. A neighbor's written complaint about Patricia entering their patio without permission to inspect a pergola. June 2024. A homeowner threatened with daily fines for refusing to provide Patricia with copies of their door keys. August 2024. A couple who'd found Patricia in their backyard at 6 a.m. measuring their deck without any prior notice. September 2024. A resident who'd been issued violation notices for unapproved window treatments after Patricia looked into their windows from the street. DA Vance read through each document carefully. This establishes a pattern. Your client has repeatedly violated privacy and property rights. This isn't isolated. This is systematic abuse. Patricia's lawyer tried to object. These are civil HOA matters, not criminal. Breaking into someone's property is criminal, regardless of the perpetrator's title. DA Vance said sharply, "Your client doesn't get immunity because she's compliance director." I played my final piece of evidence, Felix's video from his window. The footage showed Patricia arriving at my building, trying the main entrance locked, walking to the side door, pulling out a key ring with at least 6 keys, trying each one until she found the one that worked, forcing it past the deadbolt, entering the property. That's premeditation, DA Vance said. She brought multiple keys. She came prepared to force entry whether she had permission or not. Sheriff Clayton added, "We also have Miss Morales' email from 8:47 this morning, sent before the break-in, explicitly denying access and citing the specific HOA bylaw that requires consent. Miss Drummond received that email and proceeded anyway." I pulled out one more document, my final piece of evidence, a letter from my therapist, a grief counselor I'd been seeing since Daniel died. The letter, which I'd gotten permission to share for legal purposes, detailed how the memorial room was critical to my healing process, how that space represented my connection to Daniel's memory, how violating it could cause severe emotional trauma and psychological setbacks. The therapist had written, "The memorial space represents a sacred boundary, protecting Miss Morales' mental health and ability to process profound loss. Violating this boundary could undo months of therapeutic progress and cause lasting psychological harm." DA Vance read it twice, then looked at Patricia. "Miss Drummond, based on the evidence presented, you're being formally charged with criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, attempted burglary for trying to open the safe, destruction of property for the damaged lock mechanism, and violation of privacy laws. You'll be arraigned within 48 hours. Bail will be set at that time." She continued, "You're also being sued civilly for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and property damage. Do you understand these charges?" Patricia nodded slowly, her face still pale, her hands shaking on the table. Her lawyer asked for a moment to confer privately. DA Vance granted it. But before they could speak, I did something I'd been planning since the moment that gallery door opened. I pulled up one final video on my laptop. Something I'd compiled that morning while waiting to come to the station, a montage of Daniel, footage from home videos I'd converted to digital, Daniel laughing in our kitchen, Daniel photographing Mount Hood at sunrise, Daniel at galleries showing his work, Daniel in the hospital 2 weeks before he died, weak, but still smiling, still telling me to finish our book, to keep shooting, to keep creating. The video ended with a still image of the memorial room, the walls covered in his photographs, the candle burning, the safe sitting quietly in the corner holding everything I had left of him. I looked at Patricia. "This is what you violated today, not just property, not just privacy. You walked into the space where I keep my husband's memory alive. You photographed the most intimate parts of my grief. You tried to break into a container holding his ashes. And you did all of this because you believed your title gave you the right." My voice stayed level, but every word landed like a hammer. I wanted you to see his face. I wanted you to understand that he was a real person, that the memorial room is a real sacred space. And what you did isn't just illegal, it's unconscionable. The room was silent when the video ended. Patricia had tears running down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd done and knowing there was no way to undo it. DA Vance closed her folder. "We're done here. Miss Drummond, you'll be processed and released on own recognizance pending arraignment. Stay away from Miss Morales' property. No contact, no interference. Violate these conditions and you'll be arrested immediately. Understood?" Patricia nodded without speaking. Her lawyer helped her stand. As they passed me, Patricia stopped. "I didn't know about your husband. I didn't know about the memorial. I thought I was protecting the community." I looked at her directly. "You didn't think at all. You just assumed you had the right. That's the problem." She walked out without another word. And I sat there in that interrogation room feeling something shift inside me. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not revenge. Just the cold certainty that justice was about to be served properly, thoroughly, and without mercy. 5 days after Patricia's arrest, the consequences started rolling in like a slow-motion avalanche. The formal charges had been filed: criminal trespassing, breaking and entering, attempted burglary, destruction of property, violation of privacy laws. She'd been arraigned, released on $5,000 bail with strict conditions: no contact with me, no participation in HOA activities, no approach within 500 feet of my property. The judge had been clear that any violation would result in immediate arrest. But the legal consequences turned out to be just the beginning. 3 days after her arrest, the Creekside Hills HOA board called an emergency meeting. I received an email invitation from one of the board members, a man named David Chen, who'd served alongside Patricia for 3 years, but had grown increasingly uncomfortable with her methods. The email was carefully worded, but the subtext was clear. The board wanted me there. They wanted to hear my side directly. They wanted to make a public statement that Patricia's actions didn't represent how Creekside Hills operated. Thursday evening, I walked into the community center meeting room and found 42 residents already seated, more than I'd ever seen at a regular HOA meeting. The energy was tense, expectant, like everyone knew something significant was about to happen. David Chen stood at the front and called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to address this serious situation involving our former compliance director. I want to be clear from the start. Patricia Drummond is no longer serving in any HOA capacity. She's been removed from that position effective immediately." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some surprised, most clearly pleased. He continued, "We've reviewed the evidence of what happened at Miss Morales' property. We've reviewed past complaints about similar incidents, and we've concluded that Miss Drummond's actions were not only illegal, but completely contrary to the values we want this community to represent. This board takes full responsibility for not acting sooner when concerns were raised." Then he asked me to speak. I stood slowly, still not entirely comfortable being the center of attention. I walked to the front and looked at the faces staring back at me. "I didn't want any of this to happen," I started. "I didn't want to be standing here talking about criminal charges and violated boundaries. But when someone breaks into your home, into the most private space you have, you can't just let it go." I told them about the memorial room, about Daniel, about the 18 months I'd spent building that space to process grief, about how Patricia had walked in there, photographed everything, tried to open the safe containing Daniel's ashes. I kept my voice factual, but I could see the impact on faces around the room: shock, anger, sympathy. When I finished, there was silence. Then a woman in the third row stood up. "Patricia did the same thing to me last year. She came into my patio without asking, said she was checking fence compliance. I complained, but nothing happened." Another resident stood. "She fined me $150 for not giving her a spare key to my unit, said it was policy for emergency access. I paid because I didn't think I had a choice." Then another stood, and another, each one sharing a story about Patricia's overreach. The unauthorized inspections, the threats, the demands for access to private spaces. The pattern was undeniable. What had happened to me wasn't isolated. It was the culmination of years of systematic abuse that everyone had tolerated because they thought that's just how HOA enforcement worked. David Chen looked shaken. "I had no idea it was this widespread. Why didn't anyone bring these complaints to the full board?" Someone said, "We did. You didn't listen." Another said, Patricia made it clear that complaining would just result in more scrutiny. We were scared. That hit me hard. The realization that fear had kept people silent. Fear of someone who had no real power beyond what the community granted her, but who'd wielded that limited power like a weapon. David Chen spoke again. That ends today. We're implementing new policies immediately. All inspections require 72 hours written notice and homeowner written consent. No exceptions. Any investigation must be conducted by licensed third-party inspectors, not board members. All board decisions require a vote. No single person has unilateral authority. And we're establishing an oversight committee made up of residents who can review and challenge board actions. The room erupted in discussion, people talking over each other, some in support, some asking implementation questions. I stood there watching a community reckoning happen in real time. Eventually, David called for order. Miss Morales, on behalf of this board and this community, I want to apologize. We failed you. We failed everyone who complained about Miss Drummond's behavior. We should have acted sooner. We should have held her accountable. I hope these new policies demonstrate our commitment to making sure nothing like this happens again. I nodded. Thank you. That means something. The meeting continued for another hour, residents voicing concerns, the board taking notes, promises being made about transparency and accountability. After it ended, several neighbors approached me. Some thanked me for standing up to Patricia. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. I carried the canister downstairs to my darkroom, the space I'd built specifically for this work, and began the process. Loading the film onto the developing reel in complete darkness, my fingers working by muscle memory, mixing the chemicals, setting the timer, agitating the tank at precise intervals. The mechanical ritual of it was soothing. Focus on process. Don't think about outcome. After fixing and washing, I hung the negatives to dry and forced myself to walk away, to not look, to give them time. 2 hours later, I returned. The negatives hung in strips from clothespins, images visible but small and reversed. I made contact prints, first a sheet showing all 36 frames at thumbnail size, and laid it on my light table. The images took my breath away. They were all from Cape Perpetua on the Oregon coast, the place we'd driven to 3 weeks before Daniel died, where he'd insisted on shooting despite being weak and in pain. Frame after frame of coastline at sunset, rocky shores, waves crashing against headlands, light breaking through storm clouds. But it was the final 6 frames that made tears blur my vision. They weren't landscape shots. They were photographs of me. Standing on the cliff edge, looking out at the ocean, silhouetted against the sunset, wind catching my hair, camera in hand. Daniel had turned his lens away from the landscape and pointed it at me instead. I made prints of those 6 images, 8x, 10 enlargements, and hung them to dry while I sat on the darkroom floor and cried. Because I understood now what he'd been doing. That final roll wasn't about capturing one more perfect sunset. It was about giving me something to find later. A message delivered through the medium he understood best. See yourself through my eyes. See how beautiful you are. Keep shooting. Keep creating. Keep living. The next morning, I framed those 6 photographs and hung them in the memorial room alongside Daniel's landscape work. The space felt different now. Not violated anymore. Not contaminated. But transformed into something new, not just a shrine to the past, but a bridge between then and now. I lit the candle and sat in front of the images. Thank you. I said aloud, for this, for everything, for seeing me that way, for knowing I'd need this. The candle flickered in a draft. I chose to believe it was Daniel saying, "You're welcome." That afternoon, I loaded my camera with a fresh roll of film and drove to Cape Perpetua. I stood on the same cliff where Daniel had stood 18 months ago, where he'd photographed me instead of the sunset. I didn't photograph the landscape. I set up my tripod and took self-portraits. Me standing at the edge, me looking out at the ocean, me holding my camera, recreating the images Daniel had taken, but claiming them as my own. When I finished shooting, I stood at the cliff edge for a long time, breathing salt air, feeling sun on my face. I pulled the small wooden box from my jacket, the portion of Daniel's ashes I'd brought specifically for this moment, and opened it. I poured the ashes over the cliff edge, watching them catch the wind and scatter across the rocks and water below. "You're free now," I said quietly. "And so am I. No lightning strikes, no profound revelations. Just a woman standing on a cliff, releasing the last physical piece of the man she'd loved, accepting that memory and presence are different things." I stood there for another 10 minutes, then walked back to my car, got in, and started the drive home. 6 weeks after developing that final roll of film, my book was published. Light and Memory, a portrait of Pacific Northwest landscape photography, got reviewed in several major publications. To my surprise, it was the final personal chapter about Daniel, the memorial room, Patricia's violation, and developing that last roll of film that most reviewers focused on. One critic wrote, "Morales transforms a technical study into a meditation on loss, boundaries, and the courage to move forward." Another wrote, "The final chapter elevates this from photography history to universal human story about defending sacred spaces. The book sold better than my previous work." I started getting emails from readers who'd experienced similar violations, who'd dealt with authoritarian HOA boards, who'd lost spouses and didn't know how to move forward. I answered every email. I shared my experience with the legal system, the importance of documentation, the value of pressing charges even when it feels easier to move on. Some people thanked me for giving them courage to stand up to their own situations. Some just thanked me for being honest about grief and how messy and non-linear it is. 3 months after the book came out, I was back in my gallery working on a new project. Not another book this time, but a photography exhibition. I'd been approached by a Portland gallery about curating a show focused on how artists process loss and memory through their work. I was reviewing potential pieces when I heard a knock on my main entrance. I looked up to see David Chen standing there with a framed document in his hands. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. "We wanted to give you this." He handed me the frame. Inside was an official resolution, signed by all 7 HOA board members and 63 residents, thanking me for standing up for homeowner rights and catalyzing positive change in Creekside Hills. I thanked him and hung the resolution on the wall of my second-floor workspace, next to my degrees and my published articles, and Daniel's last photograph of me standing on that cliff. It felt right to have it there. A reminder that standing up for yourself can create ripples that benefit others. That night, I went up to the memorial room for my weekly visit. I lit the candle, sat down in front of Daniel's photographs and the new ones I'd added, the 6 images he'd taken of me, plus the self-portraits I'd shot at Cape Perpetua. "I finished the book," I told him. "I developed your last roll of film. I scattered some of your ashes. I'm teaching again, creating again, living again." I paused. "I'm not sure what comes next, but I'm ready to find out, and I think you'd be proud of that." The candle flickered. I chose to believe it was Daniel saying yes. I left the memorial room and walked back downstairs. The gallery was quiet. The exhibition walls glowed softly under track lighting. Everything felt balanced, loss and life, memory and motion, past and future existing in the same space without conflict. I turned off the lights and locked the doors. For the first time in 18 months, the locks didn't feel like protection against violation. They felt like simple boundaries, healthy ones, the kind that makes space for healing instead of hiding from it. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the industrial windows, catching on the chrome of my camera equipment. I brewed coffee, sat at my desk, and just listened to the quiet hum of my refrigeration unit, to the sound of the building settling, to the stillness of a space that felt lived in again instead of haunted. I walked to the window overlooking the street. My car sat there in the early light, ready for whatever journey came next. For so long, I'd measured my life by what I'd lost. By the moment, time stopped 18 months ago. But standing there that morning, I realized the restoration wasn't just about finishing Daniel's project or publishing the book. It was about every day I'd chosen to keep creating, keep teaching, keep defending the boundaries that made healing possible. Every photograph I'd taken, every student I'd mentored, every time I'd lit that candle and sat with memory instead of running from it. That afternoon, I loaded my car with camera equipment and drove toward the Columbia River Gorge. No specific destination, just following light and intuition. The road curved through forests, past waterfalls, along cliff edges where the river cut through ancient basalt. I pulled over at a viewpoint and walked to the edge with my camera. The wind was strong. The light was perfect. And for the first time in 18 months, I wasn't photographing to preserve memory. I was photographing to create something new. The shutter clicked. Film advanced. Light exposed silver halide crystals in patterns that would become images. And in that moment, wind in my hair, camera in hand, standing at the edge of something beautiful, I understood what Daniel had been trying to tell me with those final 6 photographs. This is you. This is who you are. Keep being this. I shot the rest of the roll, packed up my equipment, and drove home as the sun set behind me. When I got back to the gallery, I didn't go upstairs to the memorial room. Instead, I loaded the film onto a developing reel, mixed fresh chemicals, and began the process of bringing those new images to life. Because that's what you do when you're ready to move forward. You don't abandon the past, you carry it with you. But you also make room for the future, for new images, new stories, new moments worth preserving. I hung the negatives to dry and walked back upstairs, feeling lighter than I had in months. The memorial room door was open. The candle from last night still sat on the table, burned down to a stub. I replaced it with a fresh one, lit it, and stood for a moment looking at Daniel's photographs glowing on the walls. "Thank you for the gift," I said. "Thank you for seeing me, and thank you for letting me go." The flame flickered steady and bright, and for the first time since he died, I didn't need to imagine his response. I knew he would have wanted exactly this. Not a widow, frozen in grief, but a photographer moving forward with her camera, her vision, her life. I walked back downstairs, locked the gallery for the night, and went home to my apartment in the building next door. The sky was burning gold and orange, the last light of day painting everything in warm tones. I stood at my window and watched the sunset, cameraless for once, just present in the moment. And I found myself smiling without meaning to. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had finally found its place in the story. Loss and life, memory and motion, sacred spaces defended and boundaries honored. This was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not complete, but moving forward anyway. One photograph at a time, one day at a time, toward whatever light came next.